My parents dumped me for 9 years to care for my sick sister. When they returned, I pretended they were just random people to me. Hey Reddit, so this is going to be a long one, but trust me, it's worth it. My parents literally abandoned me for 9 years to take care of my sick sister, and when they finally remembered I existed and tried to waltz back into my life, I pretended I had absolutely no idea who these random people were. The look on their faces? Chef's kiss? I'm 27 now, but this whole mess started when I was 10 years old. That's when my sister Lily got diagnosed with some rare genetic disorder that required constant medical care and supervision. I'm not going to downplay how serious it was. She was genuinely sick and needed help. But what happened next? That's where my parents showed exactly who they really were. Instead of figuring out how to manage both kids like normal parents do, they made a choice. They sat me down in our living room one afternoon and told me I was going to live with Grandma and Grandpa for a little while so they could focus on Lily's treatment. A little while turned into 9 years. 9 years. I was 10 years old when they dropped me off at my grandparents' house with 2 suitcases and a bunch of promises about how they'd visit all the time. And this was just temporary. Spoiler alert, they lied. My mom hugged me, told me to be strong, and then they drove away. That was it. No looking back, no hesitation. Just gone. The first few months, I kept thinking they'd come get me any day. I'd pack my bags every Friday thinking maybe this weekend would be the one. My grandma would find me sitting on the porch with my backpack, waiting. After about 6 months, I stopped packing the bags. After a year, I stopped asking when they were coming back. By year 2, I'd stopped thinking about it at all during the day. The hurt just became this constant background noise, like tinnitus, but emotional. 4th grade was rough. I was the new kid at a new school, living with my grandparents in a neighborhood where everyone else had normal families. Kids would ask why I didn't live with my parents, and what was I supposed to say? That went over great with the 10-year-old crowd. I started getting into fights, not because I was a bad kid, but because I was angry and didn't know how to deal with it. Some kid would say something about my parents, I'd snap, and next thing you know, we're in the principal's office. Grandpa had to come pick me up 3 times in 2 months. He never yelled, though. Just sat me down each time and explained that fighting wasn't going to fix anything. That's when Grandpa started teaching me how to work on cars. Every Saturday, we'd be in his garage working on something. First, it was just him showing me how to change oil, check tire pressure, basic stuff. But as I got older, we graduated to bigger projects. We rebuilt an entire engine when I was 13. Took us 6 months, but we did it. Working with my hands, focusing on a problem I could actually fix, that helped more than anything else. Here's what really gets me about the whole thing. My grandparents were good people. Like genuinely kind, decent folks who stepped up when their son and daughter-in-law decided to ghost their own kid. Grandpa was a retired mechanic, and Grandma had been a nurse before she retired. They weren't rich or anything, but they made it work. They took me in without hesitation, restructured their whole retirement around raising a kid again, and never once made me feel like a burden. They'd had their whole retirement planned out. Travel, visit friends, relax after 40 years of hard work. Instead, they got me, and they never complained. Grandma would joke that I kept her young, that having a kid around gave her purpose. Grandpa would say he was glad to have someone to pass his skills on to, but I knew what they'd given up for me. I knew the trips they canceled, the money they spent on me instead of themselves, the sleep they lost worrying about a kid who wasn't even supposed to be their responsibility. But they were in their late 60s when I moved in. They did their best, but let's be real. There's a huge difference between grandparents who see you on weekends and grandparents who are suddenly doing the full-time parent thing. Grandpa's back wasn't great, so he couldn't throw a football around or do a lot of the physical stuff a 10-year-old kid wants to do with his dad. Grandma got tired easily. They loved me, and I knew that, but it wasn't the same as having your actual parents around. My parents would call maybe once every 2 or 3 months. The conversations were always the same awkward script. How's school? Are you being good for Grandma and Grandpa? Lily's doing better. We're so proud of how brave she's being. I noticed how I was never included in that pride. I was just supposed to understand that my sister was more important than me. At 10 years old, I was expected to be mature enough to accept that I'd been demoted from son to distant relative. These calls would last maybe 5 minutes tops. Always on speakerphone. Always with both my parents talking at me like they were checking items off a list. Mom would ask about school. I'd give one-word answers. Dad would ask if I needed anything. I'd say no. Then they'd talk about Lily for 3 minutes straight. Her treatments, her progress, how hard it was for them. Never once did they ask how hard it was for me. Never once did they acknowledge that maybe, possibly, I was struggling too. I remember one call when I was 12. Mom asked about school, and I actually tried to tell her about this project I'd done on the solar system. Got an A on it. Teacher said it was the best in the class. I was proud of it. But about 30 seconds into explaining it, Mom cut me off with, "That's wonderful, honey, but we have to go. Lily has an appointment in 20 minutes. Click. That was it. She couldn't spare 5 minutes to hear about something I was actually proud of. They came to visit exactly 3 times in those 9 years. 3. The first visit was about 8 months after they dropped me off. They stayed for 4 hours, spent most of it on their phones checking in with Lily's care team, and left before dinner. Mom hugged me when they arrived, said something about how much I'd grown, then basically ignored me for the next 3 hours while she paced around talking to doctors. Dad spent most of the visit in the backyard on his phone. They left after dinner without staying the night, said they needed to get back in case Lily needed them. The second visit was maybe 2 years later, lasted even less time. They showed up around noon. We had lunch at some chain restaurant where nobody talked about anything real, and they were gone by 3. That visit I remember because it was 2 weeks after my 13th birthday. A birthday they'd completely forgotten. Not even a card. When I mentioned it at lunch, Mom looked horrified and promised to send something to make up for it. She never did. The third visit was so brief and awkward I barely remember it. Might have been year 5 or 6. They came in the morning, sat in the living room for about an hour, making small talk with Grandma and Grandpa, barely spoke to me directly, then left. I remember Dad saying they should do this more often as they walked out the door. Narrator voice. They did not do it more often. Birthdays? I got a card in the mail with $20 inside. Sometimes they'd remember to call, sometimes they wouldn't. My 11th birthday, no call. My 13th, no card. My 15th, they called 3 weeks late and acted like that was totally normal. Sorry, honey, things have been so hectic with Lily's treatments. Always an excuse. Always about Lily. Christmas was the same deal. Generic card, maybe $50. A 2-minute phone call where my mom would cry about how hard everything was for them. For them. Never once did they ask how hard it was for me. My first Christmas at Grandma and Grandpa's house, I was 11. I woke up expecting, I don't know what I expected, but there was this tiny hope that maybe my parents would surprise me, show up, spend the day with me. Instead, I got a call at 9 p.m. where they wished me Merry Christmas, and then immediately started talking about how Lily was finally sleeping through the night again. I went to bed that night and cried for the first time in months. Grandma found me in the morning, eyes still red. She didn't say anything, just hugged me and made my favorite breakfast. That's who she was. She couldn't fix the situation, couldn't bring my parents back, but she could make chocolate chip pancakes and sit with me while I ate them. Small things like that meant everything. You know what messes with a kid's head? Watching your parents choose your sibling over you. Not in the normal, your sister needs more attention right now way, but in the, we literally don't have room in our lives for both of you way. Every time I'd see a dad playing catch with his kid at the park, or a family eating together at a restaurant, I'd feel this weight in my chest. That should have been me. That was supposed to be me. School was weird. Teachers would ask about my parents during conferences, and I'd have to explain that I lived with my grandparents because my sister was sick. The looks of pity got old fast. Other kids would talk about family vacations or what their parents did for a living, and I'd just sit there quietly, pretending I didn't care. Some kids asked why my parents didn't want me. That question haunted me for years. Here's what saved me, though. My grandparents never once badmouthed my parents to me. They'd get frustrated. I could tell by the way Grandma would go quiet and tight-lipped after one of those rare phone calls. But they never said anything directly negative. They just kept showing up for me. Every single day. Grandpa taught me how to change oil, fix a leaky faucet, do basic electrical work. Grandma taught me how to cook, do laundry, manage money. They were parenting me while my actual parents were playing house with just one kid. When I turned 13, I started working part-time at a local grocery store, bagging groceries and doing cart returns. Minimum wage, but it was mine. I saved almost every penny. By the time I was 15, I had a solid chunk saved up. 16, I bought myself a beat-up Honda Civic with cash. My parents didn't contribute a dime to any of it. They didn't even know about the car until months after I'd bought it. High school was when I really started to thrive. I joined the wrestling team, something I could do solo, without needing parents in the stands every week. Got pretty good at it too. Made varsity my sophomore year. Went to regionals junior and senior year. Wrestling became my outlet for all that anger and frustration I'd been carrying around for years. Every match was a chance to prove something to myself, even if it wasn't clear what I was trying to prove. My coach, Coach Henderson, saw something in me from day one. He was this gruff ex-Marine type who didn't take crap from anyone, but also genuinely cared about his wrestlers. After practice one day during my freshman year, he pulled me aside and asked about my situation. I gave him the basics. Living with grandparents, parents focused on sick sister. He just nodded and said, "All right, you need anything, you come to me." That meant a lot, more than he probably knew. Coach Henderson became this constant in my life. He'd give me rides home from practice when Grandpa's back was too bad to pick me up. He'd slip me protein bars and sports drinks when he knew money was tight at home. He never made a big deal about it, just did it. When I made varsity sophomore year, he was the first person to tell me he was proud of me. Not "good job," not "nice work." He said, "I'm proud of you." I'm not gonna lie, I almost cried right there on the mat. Guess how many matches my parents attended? 0. Not one. My grandparents came to every single match they could physically manage. Grandpa would bring his seat cushion for his back, and Grandma would bring snacks for the team. They'd sit in the stands and cheer louder than any other parents there. Other kids' parents would come up and talk to them, tell them what a good wrestler I was, how disciplined I was. Grandma would beam with pride and say, "That's our boy." But sometimes I'd watch other wrestlers with their parents in the stands. Dads recording matches on their phones, moms jumping up and cheering, whole families there to support one kid. And I'd feel that familiar weight in my chest. My senior year, I made it to the regional finals. Biggest match of my high school career. Lost by 2 points to a kid who went on to get a Division I scholarship. It was the best I'd ever wrestled. As I walked off the mat, I looked up into the stands and saw Grandma and Grandpa on their feet clapping. Coach Henderson came over and shook my hand, told me I'd done everything right, and I was happy. I really was. But later that night, alone in my room, I couldn't help but wonder if my parents even knew I wrestled, if they knew I'd made it to regionals, if they cared. Academically, I kept my head down and did the work. Maintained a 3.6 GPA without much effort. I wasn't brilliant or anything, but I understood early on that grades were my ticket out. Out of the situation, out of the small town, out of the pain. So I showed up, did the assignments, took the tests. Teachers liked me because I was quiet, reliable, never caused problems. Some of them knew my situation, small town, word gets around, and they'd check in on me sometimes. Ask how things were at home, if I needed extra help with anything. I'd always say I was fine, easier than explaining. I graduated high school with a 3.6 GPA and a partial wrestling scholarship to a state school about an hour away. Got accepted into their business program. Not Ivy League or anything fancy, but it was a solid school, and I'd be able to afford it with the scholarship, some student loans, and working part-time. My grandparents threw me a small graduation party, just them, a few neighbors, my wrestling coach. My parents sent a card. At that point, I wasn't even surprised or hurt. I was just numb to it. College was where everything changed for me. I was away from the house where I'd spent my entire childhood as the forgotten kid. I could reinvent myself. Nobody there knew my story unless I told them. I worked as a night security guard at a manufacturing plant, which paid way better than minimum wage and let me study during the quiet hours. The shift was 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., which meant I'd finish work, grab a quick shower, and head straight to morning classes. It was brutal, but it was mine. The security job was actually perfect for me. Most nights were quiet. I'd do my rounds every hour, check the locks, monitor the cameras, and otherwise had time to study. I'd sit in the security office with my textbooks spread out, working through supply chain management problems or studying for exams. One of the older guards, Frank, took a liking to me. He'd bring me sandwiches his wife made, make sure I wasn't falling asleep on duty during exam weeks. I took a full course load every semester, 15 to 18 credits. Supply chain management isn't the sexiest major, but it's practical. Turns out I was pretty good at it. My professors noticed early on that I actually gave a damn. By my sophomore year, I'd caught the attention of Professor Martinez, who taught advanced logistics and had connections in the industry. She started pushing me to apply for internships. Summer after sophomore year, I landed an internship at a regional logistics company, paid $15 an hour, felt like I'd won the lottery. That internship led to another one junior year with a bigger company. By my senior year, I had 2 internships under my belt, and companies recruiting on campus were interested. That's how I got the job offer before graduation. The company specialized in pharmaceutical logistics. Starting salary was $62,000 a year, more money than I'd ever imagined making. When I got the offer letter, I just stared at it for like an hour. I called my grandparents immediately. Grandma cried. Grandpa got choked up. That night, I took them out to the nicest restaurant in town to celebrate. Watched them look at the menu prices and tell me it was too expensive. I told them I didn't care, ordered whatever they wanted. I graduated college when I was 23. Grandma and Grandpa were there, sitting front row, despite Grandpa's knees being shot and Grandma needing a walker by that point. They'd aged so much in those years. They'd insisted on coming. We wouldn't miss this for anything, Grandpa had said. I saw them crying during the ceremony, watched Grandma take what must have been 50 pictures on her old flip phone. Meanwhile, my parents, who I hadn't seen in person since that third awkward visit when I was maybe 15, were nowhere to be found. I didn't invite them. Why would I? They hadn't been part of the journey. They didn't get to show up for the victory lap when they'd skipped the entire race. The job was intense but good. I moved to a city about 2 hours from my grandparents' place, got a decent apartment, started building a life. I'd visit Grandma and Grandpa every other weekend, bring them groceries, help around the house, make sure they were okay. By this point, they were both in their late 70s and slowing down significantly. I'd started looking into retirement communities nearby where I could move them eventually, somewhere nicer than they'd ever be able to afford on their own. Now here's where my sister comes back into the picture. Remember Lily? The reason for all this? She'd been sick from age 8 until she was about 17. 9 years of treatments, surgeries, experimental medications, the whole deal. And somewhere around her senior year of high school, she went into remission. The disease just stopped. Doctors couldn't explain it, called it a miracle. Whatever. She was better. That's fantastic, right? I genuinely was happy she was okay. I'm not a monster. Just because I got abandoned doesn't mean I wanted my sister to suffer or die. But what happened next is what really shows you who my parents are. Once Lily was better, suddenly my parents remembered they had another kid. I was 25 at this point. I hadn't lived with them since I was 10. 15 years. They'd missed my entire childhood, my entire adolescence, my high school graduation, my college graduation, every birthday, every milestone. And now they wanted back in. The first contact came through Facebook of all places. My mom sent me a friend request and a message. Hi, sweetie. It's Mom. We've been trying to reach you. Can we get your phone number? We'd love to reconnect now that things have settled down. We miss you so much. I stared at that message for days. Now that things have settled down, as if my entire existence had just been on pause, waiting for them to have time for me again. The "we miss you so much" was particularly rich. How do you miss someone you actively chose not to see for 15 years? I didn't respond. Deleted the friend request. Blocked her account. 2 weeks later, my dad tried the same thing. Same type of message, same fake warmth. Blocked him too. Then they tried calling my grandparents' house. Grandma mentioned it during one of my weekend visits. She was careful about it, didn't push, just said they'd called asking how to reach me. I told Grandma that I'd get back to them when I was ready. She nodded, understanding. She'd watched what their abandonment had done to me. She knew better than anyone that this wasn't something that could just be fixed with a phone call. But my parents weren't getting the hint. Next, they tried sending a letter to my grandparents' house. A physical letter, like we were living in the 1800s. Grandma gave it to me unopened. I tossed it in the trash without reading it. This went on for about 6 months. They were persistent, I'll give them that. Eventually, they must have done some digging because they figured out where I worked. That's when things got really weird. I was at my desk one Tuesday afternoon, working on a shipping logistics report, when our receptionist called my extension. There are 2 people here asking for you. They say they're your parents. My heart started pounding. Not from excitement, from anger. They'd actually tracked me down at my workplace. Who does that? I could have refused to see them. Should have, probably. But something in me wanted to face this. I'd spent 15 years being the forgotten one, the kid who wasn't important enough to stick around for. I'd built a whole life without them. And now here they were, showing up uninvited because they'd decided it was time to play family again. So I went down to the lobby, and there they were. My mom and dad, looking older than I remembered, but not by much. Mom had some gray in her hair now. Dad had gained weight, had reading glasses hanging from his shirt pocket. They looked like regular middle-aged people. But to me, they were strangers. The moment they saw me, my mom's face lit up. She started walking toward me with her arms out like she was going to hug me. My dad had this weird smile on his face, like everything was totally normal. And that's when I did it. I stopped walking and gave them the most confused look I could manage. Like I was trying to figure out who these random people were and why they were approaching me. Can I help you? I asked, voice polite but completely neutral, like I'd never seen them before in my life. My mom's arms dropped. Sweetie, it's us. It's Mom and Dad. I tilted my head slightly. really playing up the confusion. I'm sorry, I think there's been some mistake. I don't know you. The silence that followed was beautiful. My dad's smile vanished. My mom looked like she'd been slapped. What are you talking about? Dad asked, his voice getting that edge it used to have when he was frustrated. We're your parents. I shook my head, kept my expression perfectly neutral. No, you're not. My parents are Walter and Diane. Those were my grandparents' names. I don't know who you are or why you're here, but you need to leave. This is my workplace. Stop this right now, my mom said, her voice getting shaky. We know you're upset, but we can explain everything. Ma'am, I interrupted, keeping my voice level. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I don't know who you think I am, but I'm not interested in whatever this is. I turned to the receptionist. Sarah, can you please call security? These people are disrupting the workplace. You're being ridiculous, my dad snapped. We're your parents. We raised you. That's when I laughed. Couldn't help it. You raised me? That's interesting, because the people who raised me are currently living in a small house 2 hours from here. They're in their late 70s. They're the ones who taught me how to tie my shoes, helped me with homework, came to my wrestling matches, paid for my school clothes, made sure I had dinner every night. Those are my parents. You're nobody to me. My mom started crying. Actual tears. Please, we had to make an impossible choice. Lily was sick. We had to focus on her treatment. And I hope she's doing better, I said, and I meant it. But that doesn't change the fact that you made your choice 15 years ago. You chose her. You chose to drop me off and forget about me. And that's fine. You did what you thought you had to do. But don't show up here after all this time expecting me to pretend like you're my parents. You're not. You haven't been for a very long time. Security had arrived by then. 2 guys I knew pretty well from taking breaks in the security office. They looked confused but professional. Everything okay here? One of them asked. These 2 showed up claiming to be my parents, I said calmly. I've never seen them before. They're causing a disturbance. Can you escort them out? This is insane, my dad yelled. We're his parents. Tell them. The security guards looked at me. I shrugged. I have no idea who these people are. That was all it took. The guards started ushering my parents toward the door. My mom was full-on sobbing now, reaching out toward me. My dad was red-faced and angry, still yelling about how ungrateful I was, how they'd sacrificed everything for our family, how I was breaking my mother's heart. I just stood there watching them leave. Felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not guilt, not anger. Just nothing. They were strangers to me, and that was the truth. The people who raised me were Grandma and Grandpa. These 2? They were just people who happened to share my DNA. After they were gone, Sarah the receptionist looked at me with wide eyes. That was intense. Are you okay? I'm fine, I said. And I was. If they show up again, don't call me down. Just have security remove them immediately. Can do, she said, still looking shaken. I went back to my desk and got back to work. My hands weren't even shaking. I'd spent years building up walls, creating a life where they didn't exist. And in that moment, those walls held firm. But they didn't give up. Of course they didn't. The next contact came through my company email. My dad had somehow found it and sent me this long message about how hurt they were, how cruel I was being, how they deserved a chance to explain. I forwarded it to HR with a note about an external harassment issue. HR blocked his email address from the company system. Then they tried showing up at my apartment. I lived in a secure building, so they couldn't get past the front desk. But the doorman called up one Saturday morning saying a couple was downstairs asking for me. I told him I didn't know anyone by those names and to not let them up. He said they'd been there for an hour already. I told him to call the police if they didn't leave. They left. This went on for about 2 months. They were relentless. Letters to my apartment that I threw away unopened. More Facebook attempts from accounts they created. They even tried to contact my boss, which was a huge mistake because he forwarded their email directly to me and asked if I wanted to pursue a restraining order. I told him I was handling it privately. The breaking point came when they showed up at my grandparents' house. That crossed a line. I was there for my usual weekend visit, helping Grandpa fix a leaky pipe under the kitchen sink, when my parents just walked in. Grandma had left the door unlocked because I was coming in and out carrying tools from Grandpa's garage. They literally just walked into the house like they owned it. I was under the sink with a wrench when I heard my mom's voice. Walter, Diane, we need to talk about our son. I slid out from under the sink so fast I smacked my head on the pipe. But the pain didn't matter. I stood up, wrench still in hand, and walked into the living room where my grandparents were sitting on the couch looking extremely uncomfortable. My parents were standing in the middle of the room like they were about to give some kind of presentation. You need to leave, I said, voice hard. Now, we're not leaving until you talk to us, my dad said. This has gone on long enough. I've asked you multiple times to leave me alone. You've showed up at my workplace, my home, and now here. You're harassing me. Leave before I call the police. We're your parents, my mom shouted. You can't just pretend we don't exist. Watch me, I said, pulling out my phone. I'm calling the cops. You have 30 seconds to get out of this house. Go ahead, my dad challenged. Call them. We'll tell them all about how our ungrateful son is refusing to even speak to us after everything we sacrificed. You sacrificed nothing, I cut him off. You made a choice. You chose Lily. You chose to abandon me for 9 years. And now you're mad because I'm not falling all over myself to welcome you back? You don't get to do that. You don't get to check out of my life for 15 years and then demand I pretend everything's fine. My mom was crying again. We thought you understood. Lily was dying. I was 10 years old. My voice was louder than I intended. I was a child who needed his parents, and you dumped me here and forgot about me. Do you have any idea what that does to a kid? Do you know what it's like to watch your parents choose your sibling over you? To grow up knowing you weren't important enough to stick around for? That's not fair, my dad started. Fair? I laughed. You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about how you called me maybe 6 times in 9 years. How you visited exactly 3 times. How you missed my birthdays, my graduations, every major moment in my life. How you sent $20 bills and cards like that made up for not being there. How you never asked how I was doing, how school was going, if I was okay. It was always about Lily. Always. She was sick, my mom screamed. What were we supposed to do? Be parents to both of us, I screamed back. Figure it out. Get help. There were options that didn't involve completely abandoning one kid, but you took the easy way out. You focused on one child and erased the other from your life because it was simpler. Well, congratulations. You got exactly what you wanted. You had one kid to focus on. And now that she's better, you can't just reload your save file and pick up where you left off with me. The room went silent. My grandparents sat there looking devastated. They'd never heard me talk about this stuff out loud. I'd kept it bottled up for so long. We're sorry, my mom whispered. We're so sorry. We thought we were doing what was best. Best for who? I asked. Because it sure as hell wasn't best for me. And you know what the really messed up part is? I don't even blame you for focusing on Lily when she was sick. I get it. She needed you. But what I can't forgive is how completely you erased me. You could have visited more, called more, been present in some way. But you didn't. You chose not to. And that choice has consequences. Please, my dad said. And for the first time, he sounded genuinely broken. We're trying to make this right. You can't, I said simply. What's done is done. You can't give me back my childhood. You can't give me back those years. You can't undo the damage of growing up feeling completely unwanted by your own parents. So yeah, when you show up now asking to be let back in, I'm going to treat you like the strangers you are, because that's what you are to me. That's not true, my mom sobbed. We're your family. No, I said, pointing at my grandparents. They're my family. They're the ones who raised me, who showed up every single day, who sacrificed their retirement to take care of a kid they didn't have to take care of. They're my parents in every way that matters. You two? You're just DNA donors who got overwhelmed and bailed. I pulled out my phone again. I'm calling the police now. You have one more chance to leave voluntarily. My dad grabbed my mom's arm. Let's go. This isn't working. As they headed toward the door, my mom turned back one more time. What about Lily? Don't you want to know your sister? That stopped me. I hadn't even thought about Lily in all this. How old is she now? 17? 18? She just turned 18 last month, my mom said quietly. Then she's an adult. If she wants to reach out to me, she can. But that's her choice to make, not yours. And for the record, I don't blame her for any of this. She was a sick kid who needed help. None of this is her fault. But it doesn't change the fact that I have no relationship with her. We're strangers too. They left after that. Grandma immediately got up and hugged me. I broke down in her arms, crying for the first time in years about all of it. Grandpa sat there with tears running down his face. They'd known this was all under the surface, but hearing me actually say it out loud hit different. You did the right thing, Grandpa said eventually. Standing up for yourself. After that day, my parents finally seemed to get the message. The contact attempts stopped. No more showing up places, no more emails, no more letters. Just silence. About 3 months later, I got a Facebook message from an account I didn't recognize. When I opened it, I saw it was from Lily. Her profile picture was a recent graduation photo. She'd graduated high school, looked healthy and happy. The message was simple. Hey, I know we don't know each other, and I'm not trying to force anything. I just wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what happened to you because of me. I didn't ask mom and dad to abandon you, and if I'd been old enough to understand what was happening, I would have done something. I get it if you don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that I don't think what they did was okay. You deserved better. If you ever want to meet up or talk, I'm here. No pressure. Lily. I stared at that message for a long time. She was right. None of this was her fault. She was just a sick kid caught up in parents who handled an impossible situation in the worst way possible. I wrote back, "Thanks for reaching out. I appreciate the apology, but just so you know, this was never about you. You were sick. You needed help. I get that. What I couldn't get past was mom and dad completely dropping me from their lives instead of finding a way to be there for both of us. I don't have any hard feelings toward you specifically, but I also don't really know you. We're essentially strangers who happen to share DNA. If you want to grab coffee sometime and just talk, I'm open to that. But I'm not looking to suddenly have a relationship with mom and dad through you. That door is closed." She responded almost immediately. "I understand, and I'm not a messenger for them. I have my own issues with how they handled all of this, honestly. I'd like to grab coffee if you're up for it. Just us. No expectations. As for my parents, haven't spoken to them since that day at my grandparents' house. They sent a few more attempts after that through Lily, who shut them down each time. He said the door's closed and I'm not getting in the middle of it," she'd tell them. The last I heard, they'd moved to a smaller house in a different town. Apparently, they'd spent so much money on Lily's medical care over the years that they were pretty financially strained. They'd both kept working, but between the medical bills and probably the fact that they'd basically lived for one child for a decade, they didn't have much saved. They were looking at working into their late 60s, maybe early 70s. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true. My parents kicked me out of my room because my sister and her kids wanted to move in. "Stay in the basement for now," my father demanded. Then they hiked my rent to $1,400. So I planned my exit and watched them lose their minds. Sup Reddit. You know those stories you scroll through at 2 a.m.? The ones about families so messed up you wonder if they're even real? 3 months ago, I became one of them. Grab some popcorn and enjoy the shit show. I'm Colton, 19 male. Part-time factory worker, full-time engineering student at State, and apparently full-time family doormat. At least, I used to be. I'd been living in my childhood bedroom, paying my parents $350 a month in rent while juggling 12-hour weekend shifts and a course load that would make most people cry. I had a plan. Save up. Graduate. Get out. I had about $6,000 in my savings account from 2 years of grinding, and I was supposed to be moving into my own place by summer. The factory work was brutal. We supplied packaging materials to half the businesses in the county. My job was loading trucks, breaking down pallets, and doing whatever grunt work needed doing. The pay was decent for a part-time job, and most importantly, nobody cared about family drama. It was the only place I could breathe. Now let me tell you about my older sister, and how she decided to ruin my plans. Vicky is 27. Single mom of 2 kids she treats more like accessories than humans. Divorced from a guy named Jason who, according to family legend, was the worst person to ever exist. Funny thing about Jason, though, every time I actually talked to the guy, he seemed pretty normal. Showed up to his kids' events, paid child support on time, never said a bad word about Vicky even after everything. The marriage fell apart because Vicky refused to work, spent money they didn't have, and threw tantrums when Jason suggested maybe she could contribute something to the household besides posting on Instagram. Anyways, Vicky has always been the golden child. I accepted that reality around age 11 when my parents took her on a big vacation for her 16th birthday, but told me we couldn't afford a gift for my 12th. They could afford to renovate her bedroom, though, twice, and buy her a car when she turned 17. I got a bus pass and a lecture about earning my own way. When I turned 17, I got a job at a fast food place and saved for 8 months to buy a 15-year-old Corolla with 200,000 miles on it. My parents didn't contribute a dime, but they sure had opinions about how I should be grateful for the opportunity to learn responsibility. My mother, Donna, operates under the assumption that Vicky's life is harder than mine. Single motherhood is exhausting, Colton. She has anxiety, Colton. You don't understand the pressure she's under, Colton. The woman has never once asked about my college, my job, or my plans for the future, but she can recite Vicky's entire life story the whole time. My father, Vince, is worse. He's the type of guy who peaked in high school, talks about his glory days every chance he gets, and has spent 30 years being bitter that the world didn't hand him everything he thought he deserved. He takes that bitterness out on whoever's convenient. Usually me. Everything I did was wrong. My grades weren't good enough even when I made the dean's list. My job wasn't prestigious enough even though I was paying my own way. My hobbies were a waste of time. He once told me I'd never amount to anything because I didn't have the drive that Vicky had. Vicky, who hadn't held a job longer than 5 months in her entire life. He had opinions about everything I did. Meanwhile, Vicky could do no wrong. Her failures were circumstances. Her poor choices were bad luck. Her constant need for bailouts was just family helping family. The double standard would have been funny if it wasn't my actual life. The only person in the extended family who ever called it out was my great-aunt Marlene, my dad's aunt. She was 82, sharp as a tack, and controlled access to my grandparents' estate. My parents had been sucking up to her for years, hoping to be well-positioned when the time came. But Marlene had always given me a look at family gatherings, the kind that said she saw exactly what was happening even if she didn't say it out loud. So when Vicky announced in March that she was losing her apartment because she couldn't make rent, a familiar dread settled in my stomach. I knew what was coming. I just didn't expect it to be quite so brutal. The conversation happened on a Tuesday evening. I had just gotten home from an 8-hour shift at the factory, still covered in cardboard dust and smelling like industrial adhesive. My hands were raw from breaking down pallets. My back ached from loading trucks. I wanted a shower and my bed in that order. My parents were sitting at the kitchen table wearing matching expressions of serious concern. Never a good sign. My father didn't waste time. Vicky and the kids are moving in. They need your room. I paused. Then I set down my bag. So where am I supposed to sleep? The basement. We'll set it up nice. The basement that floods every time it rains? My mother jumped in with her soothing voice. It's temporary, Colton. Your sister needs support right now. You get that, right? I got it. Just not what they thought I did. Then came the rent conversation. My father's face shifted into that condescending expression. He said the rent situation needed to change anyway. With more people in the house, expenses would go up. They were thinking $1,400 a month was fair for my contribution. $1,400. I did the math instantly. I made about $1,600 a month at the factory, working 30 hours a week. After tuition payments, books, gas to get to campus and work, car insurance, phone bill, and the basic costs of being alive, I cleared maybe $300 in actual savings. They were asking for money that literally did not exist. I would have had to quit school and work full-time just to afford a basement futon in a room that floods. My mother tried to soften it. I was a young man without children or real responsibilities. Vicky had 2 kids depending on her. Surely I could understand that their needs were greater than mine. I was working 30 hours a week while taking 15 credit hours and maintaining a 3.4 GPA. But sure, no real responsibilities. I could have argued. I could have pointed out every single instance of favoritism from the past 19 years. I could have asked why Vicky's poor life choices always became my problem to solve. Instead, I said nothing. Picked up my backpack, walked to my room, closed the door, and started planning my exit. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the dark, running numbers, mapping out possibilities, and slowly realizing something that should have been obvious years ago. My family didn't see me as a person. I was a resource, a convenient body to absorb the overflow of Vicky's perpetual disasters. And they genuinely didn't understand why I might have a problem with that. $1,400 for a basement futon. The sheer audacity of it kept circling back, spiking my blood pressure every time. Around 4 a.m., I texted my best friend Alan. Alan and I had been tight since freshman year of high school. We met in detention, both of us there for reasons that weren't our fault. Him for telling a teacher exactly what he thought of her grading system. Me for defending myself when some guy twice my size decided he didn't like my face. He was the kind of guy who showed up without being asked, helped without keeping score. His own family situation had gone sideways a couple years back. His dad bounced when he was 15. His mom remarried a guy who made it clear Alan wasn't welcome in his house. By 17, Alan was living with his grandmother. By 18, he had his own apartment. He'd been renting a 2-bedroom place for the past year. His older brother was supposed to be his roommate, but bailed for a job in another state after 3 months, leaving Alan with an extra room and rent he could barely cover alone. He'd been floating ads for a roommate, but hadn't found anyone he trusted. I gave him the short version. Parents tripling my rent, moving me to the basement, sisters moving in. I need out. His response came in 3 minutes. Spare room's been empty for 6 months. You want it? It's yours. We'll figure out the details tomorrow. That's the thing about real friends. They don't make you justify yourself when you're drowning. They just throw you the rope. We met up the next day at a diner near campus. Alan showed up looking like he'd been up all night. He worked security at a warehouse, overnight shifts that paid just enough to cover his bills. Between his schedule and mine, we'd gotten used to functioning on minimal sleep. He slid into the booth and got right to it. So what's the play here? You need out fast or you need out quiet? Both. They can't know until I'm ready. He nodded slowly. How long you need? Few weeks, maybe a month. Done. We'll make it work. He flagged down the waitress for coffee. Your family's gonna lose it when they figure out what happened. That's kind of the point. He grinned. He laid out the details simply. The spare room had a bed, a desk, and a closet. The apartment was small but clean. The landlord was hands-off as long as rent came in on time. Move in whenever I was ready. He also had a plan for my car situation. If I left my car at my parents' house overnight, they'd assume I was home. He'd pick me up after my evening appearance and drop me back in the morning. We mapped out the timing, figured out parking spots where his car wouldn't be noticed, even established backup routes in case someone was unexpectedly awake. The guy treated my family escape like a heist movie. I appreciated it more than I could say. The next morning, I told my parents I agreed to their terms. Smiled and nodded when my mother explained the timeline for Vicky's arrival. Even helped my father clear some junk from the basement and pretended to be grateful for the futon they'd ordered. The key to a good exit strategy is making sure nobody sees it coming. I started moving my stuff out that same week. Never all at once. Never anything obvious. A few boxes of books and games to Alan's place on Tuesday. Some clothes on Thursday. My gaming PC carefully disassembled on Saturday when my parents went to some neighborhood cookout they'd been invited to. My parents watched TV in the living room until 11, then went to bed. I had a window from about midnight to 5:30 where no one would be moving around the house. I tested it 3 times before I started the real extractions. Walked through the house at different hours. Checked which doors creaked. Found out the side door was quieter than the front. Discovered the motion light in the backyard had a dead zone if you hugged the fence. By the time I was ready to move the big stuff, I had the whole operation mapped. My coworker at the factory, a guy named Garrett, helped with the heavy lifting. He told me something I've never forgotten. He said family's supposed to be the people who have your back, but sometimes blood just means you're related to people who'd bleed you dry if you let them. He said the smartest thing he ever did was learn the difference. Garrett had a truck. He let me borrow it twice to move the bigger items. Didn't ask for gas money. Didn't make it a whole thing. Just tossed me the keys and told me to bring it back whenever. By the time Vicky arrived with her 2 kids and enough luggage for a month-long cruise, I had been sleeping at Alan's for a full week already. My room at my parents' house contained exactly what I wanted them to see. Furniture I didn't care about, clothes I never wore, and enough personal items to maintain the illusion. The performance was about to begin. Vicky's kids were exactly as terrible as I remembered. Braxton was 8, spoiled, loud, and completely incapable of hearing the word no. He'd been raised to believe the entire world existed to serve his needs, and he responded to any pushback with screaming fits that could shatter glass. The kid had never faced a consequence in his life. Vicky's response to his meltdowns was always the same. She'd sigh dramatically, shoot whoever had upset him a dirty look, and then give him whatever he wanted. I watched him throw a full tantrum in the kitchen on day 3 because my mother served him chicken nuggets in the wrong shape. He wanted dinosaurs, and she'd made circles. The screaming lasted 20 minutes. My mother apologized and promised to buy the right kind next time. That's when I knew this was going to be worse than I expected. Paisley was 5, quieter than her brother but twice as destructive. She had a talent for finding the most valuable item in any room and destroying it. She'd ruined 2 of my mother's vases within the first week, crayoned on the dining room wall, flushed a full roll of toilet paper down the upstairs bathroom, and caused an overflow that damaged the ceiling below. My mother blamed the vases for being in the wrong place, the walls for not being washable, and the plumber for overcharging. Never the kid, never the parent. The hits kept coming. Week 2, Braxton threw my father's reading glasses into the toilet. My father bought new ones and said nothing. Week 3, Paisley found my mother's makeup bag and redecorated the bathroom mirror with lipstick. My mother cleaned it up and called it artistic expression. Week 4, both kids somehow got into the garage and knocked over 3 shelves of my father's tools. Nobody got punished. Living in the same house as these 2 chaos agents, even temporarily, required constant vigilance. I started keeping my remaining valuables hidden. Anything I actually cared about went to Alan's place, piece by piece. My room became a decoy, filled with things I could afford to lose. The basement was uninhabitable. The futon arrived damaged. One of the support bars was bent, and it sagged in the middle like a sad hammock. The single basement window was too small to let in meaningful light, and the whole space smelled like mildew and forgotten laundry. There were spiderwebs in every corner. The concrete floor was perpetually damp even when it hadn't rained. The furnace made sounds that suggested it was one bad day away from exploding. The first night it actually rained, I came down to find a small lake forming near the water heater. The drain in the floor had backed up, sending 2 inches of murky water across half the basement. The futon was soaked. My father's solution was to tell me to put down some towels and deal with it. $1,400 a month. For this. Not that I actually slept there. Every night around midnight, once my parents were asleep and Vicky was busy doom-scrolling on the couch, I'd slip out the side door and meet Alan at the usual spot down the block. He'd drive me back to his place. Then he'd drop me back before 6 a.m. to shower and maintain the illusion. Alan thought the whole operation was hilarious. He started calling it the Great Escape, complete with updates and mission briefings whenever I arrived. He'd leave snacks on my bed like care packages. Drew a welcome banner that said Refugee Camp, with surprisingly good artistic detail. One night he greeted me at the door in full camouflage face paint, saluting, and nearly made me wake up his downstairs neighbor with my laughing. 2 weeks after Vicky moved in, things escalated. I came home from the factory to find Braxton in my room. He'd somehow gotten past the lock I'd installed, and he was sitting on my bed playing with something. When I got closer, my stomach dropped. My grandfather's watch. The only thing he'd left me when he died, when I was 12. It was a simple field watch, but it meant everything to me. I'd hidden it in my desk drawer under some old papers. Braxton had the back panel off. He'd pried it open with something sharp. Parts were scattered across my bed. The crystal face was cracked. "What are you doing?" My voice came out flat. Braxton looked up, startled. "I wanted to see how it worked. That was my grandfather's. He's dead. That's all I have left of him." The kid's lips started trembling. Here it comes, I thought. "Mom! Colton's being mean to me!" Vicky appeared in my doorway within 30 seconds. Full mama bear mode activated. "Why are you yelling at my son?" I held up the watch pieces. "He broke into my locked room and destroyed this. It was our grandfather's." Her response nearly made my head explode. "He's 8, Colton. He didn't know any better. Maybe don't leave valuable things where kids can find them. You're overreacting, like always." Something in me went cold. Not the explosive kind. The kind where everything gets really clear. You know why your kid thinks he can do whatever he wants? Because you've never once told him no. You've never taught him that other people's things matter. Don't you dare tell me how to raise my children. Someone has to. Because you're raising a kid nobody's going to be able to stand. And when he's 30 and still living in someone's basement because the world doesn't revolve around him, that's on you. Vicky's face went through about 6 different shades of outrage. "You're just jealous. You've always been jealous of me. That's what this is really about. You're right about one thing. This is about attention. The kind where I get blamed for everything, and you get a pass for everything. But I'm done playing that game. You're so dramatic. You always have been. And you're a leech. But at least I can change." I told her to get out of my room. She huffed and grabbed Braxton, shooting me a look that promised this wasn't over. I could hear her complaining to my mother downstairs about how I'd traumatized her precious baby. That night, I moved the last of my actual belongings to Alan's place. The watch pieces went into a small box. I'd find someone who could repair it eventually, but it breaking had given me something unexpected. Permission. Permission to stop pretending. Stop performing. Stop being the son and brother they wanted me. The countdown to the reveal had officially begun. Living 2 lives turned out to be easier than expected when nobody's paying attention to you anyway. My routine became clockwork. Show up at my parents' house around 6 p.m. Eat whatever dinner was available, usually leftovers since my mother now cooked primarily for Vicky and the kids. Make small talk that nobody actually listened to. Retreat to the basement. Mess up the futon to look recently slept in. Wait until the house went quiet. Drive to Alan's. Sleep in an actual bed. Return before dawn. Shower. Go to class or work. Repeat. The attention to detail was almost satisfying. I kept a specific glass of water on the basement nightstand. Half empty. Replaced fresh each day so it never grew a film. Left the bathroom slightly damp after my morning shower. Made sure my toothbrush was always in the holder at the right angle. Set an alarm for 6:30 that I'd cancel before it could wake anyone, just in case they happened to notice. All the little touches that made it look like someone was actually living down there. Nobody checked, not a single time in 7 weeks. My parents didn't notice anything because they were too busy catering to Vicky's ever-growing list of needs. My mother had become a full-time babysitter, housekeeper, and emotional support system for her. She cooked 3 different meals every night because Braxton only ate chicken nuggets, Paisley was going through a picky phase, and Vicky was doing some influencer diet she'd seen online. She did Vicky's laundry because Vicky was too tired. She cleaned up after the kids because kids will be kids. My father had retreated into his garage workshop, emerging only to eat and make passive-aggressive comments about how hard he worked to support this family. The man hadn't had steady work in 3 years. My mother was the one with the actual job, managing an office across town. My factory paycheck was supposed to be their supplemental income, and yet somehow he'd convinced himself he was the backbone of the whole operation. He'd come in for dinner, complain about something, criticize whatever I was doing, praise whatever Vicky was doing, and retreat back to his cave. Vicky, meanwhile, had settled into her role as permanent houseguest with disturbing ease. She'd taken over the living room as her personal domain. Her stuff was everywhere. She didn't cook, didn't clean, didn't contribute to groceries or utilities. Just existed, taking up space and resources while posting inspirational quotes online about rising from adversity and the strength of single motherhood. Her social media was a masterpiece of delusion. Carefully staged photos of herself looking put together with captions about self-care and female empowerment. Curated shots of the kids with hashtags about blessed motherhood. The kids got worse without any real structure or discipline. Braxton had evolved from spoiled to genuinely uncontrollable. He threw tantrums at dinner if his food touched on the plate, broke things and blamed others or nobody at all, hit his sister when he didn't get his way, and nobody did anything about it except tell her to stop crying and be the bigger person. She was 5. Vicky's response was always to make excuses or redirect blame onto whoever was convenient. Paisley had discovered that she could get attention by screaming, and she used this power liberally. She also started going into the rooms and taking things. My mother called it exploring. I called it theft. The basement continued to deteriorate. The futon fully collapsed after Braxton jumped on it repeatedly during one of his unsupervised adventures into my supposed living space. Nobody offered to replace it. The running toilet became a constantly running toilet, which my father promised to fix next week for 3 consecutive weeks. A pipe started leaking near the water heater, creating a permanent puddle that smelled like rust and sadness. My co-worker Garrett became my unlikely confidant during this period. We worked the same Saturday shifts at the factory, 12-hour days that left you too tired to think, which was honestly a relief. Garrett was the guy everyone went to when they needed advice. He'd been at the factory for 11 years, knew everyone's story, and never repeated anything you told him. He was 34, divorced, and had his own story of family dysfunction, parents who prioritized his brother. He said the hardest part wasn't leaving. It was accepting that the people who were supposed to love him no matter what had conditions attached the whole time. Once he realized that, everything else got simpler. Man, that one stuck with me. Alan, meanwhile, had become my operational support and chief morale officer. He kept track of the timeline, helped me plan my next moves, and provided the dark humor necessary to survive. When I told him about the watch, he got genuinely angry on my behalf. Then he suggested we find something of Vicky's and accidentally damage it. I told him that was petty. He agreed completely. Then he asked if I wanted to do it anyway. I did not, but I seriously appreciated the offer. One night, about 5 weeks after I'd stopped sleeping there, I was waiting by the side door for Alan's pickup when my father appeared in the garage. Got a minute? He leaned against his workbench, arms crossed. Things have gotten complicated around here. Your sister needs more help than we thought. The expenses are adding up? I bet. I need you to step up, Colton. I almost laughed. Almost. I'm working on it. Finances are tight with school. I know it's tough, but we all gotta pitch in. He looked at me like he expected gratitude. That's what family does. Right. He patted my shoulder. Said he knew I'd come through. Alan picked me up that night. I knew exactly where things were heading, and they didn't have a clue. The family dinner that ended everything was my mother's idea. Vicky had gotten a part-time job at a boutique clothing store. 10 hours a week, minimum wage, no benefits, but apparently this was worthy of celebration. My mother insisted on a real family meal. The timing was almost too perfect. 7 weeks since I'd actually slept in that house. 7 weeks of maintaining a performance so convincing that trained actors would be impressed. And they still had no idea. I almost didn't go. But there was a part of me, the part that had been invisible for 19 years. The part that had absorbed every criticism and every comparison and every reminder that I would never be good enough, that wanted to see their faces when they finally realized the truth. So I went. The dinner table was chaos from the moment I arrived. Braxton refused to sit still, bouncing in his chair and making explosion sounds while he played with his food. Paisley kept flicking green beans at her brother, giggling every time one hit him in the face. Vicky was on her phone, completely ignoring both children. My mother tried desperately to maintain some kind of order, while also serving everyone and making sure every dietary preference was accommodated. She looked exhausted. The past 6 weeks of being a full-time servant to Vicky's family had taken a visible toll, but she'd never admit it. My father sat at the head of the table, surveying his kingdom with the satisfaction of a man who'd done absolutely nothing to earn any of it. The pot roast was overcooked. The mashed potatoes were from a box. They talked about Vicky's new position, about how proud they were of her for pulling herself together, about how things were finally looking up for the family. I ate in silence, watching the whole show unfold around me. About halfway through dinner, my father cleared his throat in that way that signaled an important announcement was coming. The conversation died down. Even the kids sensed something and got slightly quieter. He said we needed to discuss the rent situation. I was 2 months behind. That was $2,800 I owed the family. I set down my fork. Vicky looked up from her phone, suddenly very interested in the conversation. My mother's face tightened. My father continued. He understood that money was tight for everyone, especially young people just starting out. But Vicky was trying to save up for her own place. The household expenses had increased dramatically. They needed everyone to contribute their fair share. The words just hung there. They'd rehearsed this, planned it out, probably discussed exactly how to phrase everything to make it sound reasonable. I looked at my sister, lounging in her chair. I looked at my parents, who had charged me rent since I was 17, while my sister had never paid a dime toward anything in her entire adult life. And I started laughing. I stood up from the table, carefully placed my napkin beside my plate, straightened my shirt. How funny, I said. I haven't lived here for 7 weeks. Silence. My mother's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and panic. She asked what I meant by that. I told them exactly what I meant. I moved out 7 weeks ago. The basement has been empty every single night, and not one of you noticed. Not once did anyone knock on that door. Not once did anyone wonder why they never heard me. 7 weeks. Nothing. My father's face went red. He said that was impossible. My car was in the driveway every day. I parked it there to keep up appearances. I've been staying with someone who actually notices when I exist. Vicky found her voice, high and accusatory. She called me a liar, said this was just another attempt to make everything about myself. I turned to face her, told her the family was going through a difficult time because of her choices, her inability to manage money or parent her own kids. Every crisis in this house for the past decade had her name on it. I told her that her son broke our grandfather's watch, and her response was to tell me I shouldn't leave valuable things where children can find them. In my own locked room, my mother tried to step in, said I was being dramatic. I asked her what family she thought we were. The one that canceled my birthdays for Vicky's events? Paid for her wedding and her car while telling me to earn my own way? Wanted to charge me $1,400 for a flooded basement while she lived here free? My father stood up, called me ungrateful, said they'd given me a roof for 19 years. I told him I'd paid rent for 2 years. On time. Every month. While working and going to school. While they gave my sister thousands they claimed they didn't have when I needed help. I was done pretending any of this made sense. He took a step toward me. I didn't flinch. Whatever he saw in my face made him stop. Vicky demanded to know who I was to judge her. Her life was hard. Being a single mom was exhausting. I told her I wasn't helping with kids whose mother defended them destroying my property. Kids with no boundaries because she was too lazy to set any. Kids she used as shields whenever anyone criticized her. Braxton started his dramatic crying routine. Vicky rushed to comfort him, shooting me a death glare. I turned to my parents one last time, told them I'd already changed my mail forwarding to my new address, removed my name from any shared accounts, taken everything that belonged to me, including documentation of every time they claimed they couldn't help me while funding Vicky's lifestyle. My mother asked what that was supposed to mean. I told her Great Aunt Marlene would be getting some interesting reading material. Then I walked out. I drove to Alan's place. He was waiting with a pizza and a movie queued up. Asked how it went. I told him they didn't even realize I was gone for 7 weeks. Not a single check on the basement. Not a single knock on the door. 7 weeks of absolute nothing. And they still expected me to pay $2,800 in back rent. He handed me a slice and said that was the best thing he'd ever heard about secondhand. Then he asked if I wanted to watch something. We watched the movie. I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, my phone had 47 unread messages. My mother crying about how I'd embarrassed the family. My father demanding I come back and apologize for disrespecting them in front of the children. Vicky sending paragraphs about how I'd traumatized Braxton and ruined what was supposed to be her special dinner, celebrating her new job. I read them all, responded to none. What they didn't know yet was the other shoe waiting to drop. See, I'd mentioned keeping records. That wasn't a bluff. For the past 2 years, I documented everything. Every time my parents claimed they couldn't help me financially while giving money to Vicky, every rent payment I made, every dismissive comment about my education or job. And more importantly, I documented the state of the basement they expected me to pay $1,400 a month for. Photos of the water damage, videos of the flooding, screenshots of my texts asking when repairs would be made, documentation of the futon that arrived broken and was never fixed. I sent all of it to my grandfather's sister, my great-aunt Marlene. She was the one who controlled access to my grandparents' estate, the one my parents had been sucking up to for years in hopes of being included in her will. Aunt Marlene was 82, sharp as a tack. She'd never been a fan of how my parents treated me, but I'd never given her specific proof before. Until now. I included a letter explaining everything, all of it. 3 days later, she called my parents. I wasn't on the call, but Garrett's cousin worked at the diner where my mother went. According to the second-hand account, Marlene told them she was disappointed in how they'd raised their children, that she'd be reconsidering some of her estate plans in light of this new information. My parents lost their minds. Suddenly, I was getting apologetic texts. My mother wanted to meet for coffee. My father suggested we talk things through. Vicky even reached out, claiming she'd overreacted and we should move past this for the sake of the family. Aunt Marlene's estate was worth several $100,000. Suddenly, treating me well had financial incentives. I didn't respond to any of it. Alan helped me find a watch repair specialist who could restore my grandfather's watch. Took about 3 weeks and cost more than I wanted to spend, but it was worth it. The crystal was replaced. The mechanism was cleaned and serviced. It ticked again, steady and reliable, the way it had when my grandfather wore it. Garrett offered to let me pick up extra shifts at the factory. More hours meant more money, which meant faster progress toward my goals. I took every shift he could give me. The semester ended. I passed all my classes. Didn't tell my parents about my grades. They didn't ask. Vicky lasted about 4 more months at my parents' house before the arrangement imploded. According to the neighborhood gossip network, she had a massive fight with my mother over whose turn it was to watch the kids, said some things that couldn't be unsaid, moved out in a dramatic huff, funded by yet another emergency loan from my parents that she'd never repay. She's renting a place across town now, still working part-time at the boutique, still posting inspirational content about single motherhood and overcoming adversity. My parents and I haven't spoken in 6 months. The silence is strange sometimes. Not painful exactly, just unfamiliar. There are moments, usually late at night, when I wonder if I was too harsh, if maybe I should have tried harder to make them understand. Then I remember the watch, the basement, the $1,400 for a broken futon in a flooding room, and the wondering stops. Alan's apartment has become home in a way my parents' house never was. We split everything fairly. We communicate like adults. When something breaks, we fix it together. When one of us is struggling, the other steps up without keeping score. That's what family is supposed to look like. Support without scorekeeping. Respect without conditions. Showing up because you want to, not because you have to. I just had to build it myself. My grandmother sent me a birthday card last month. She's the only one from that side of the family who still reaches out. She'd heard the whole story from her sister, my great-aunt Marlene. Marlene herself sent a separate card a few weeks later. Inside was a check for $500 and a note with almost the same sentiment. She'd also updated her estate plans. I got the impression my parents weren't going to be as well positioned as they'd hoped. My mother tried one final approach about a month ago. She showed up at the factory, somehow figuring out where I worked. The receptionist paged me looking confused. I found her in the parking lot standing by her car, holding a coffee like a peace offering. Can we talk? Please? About what? About fixing this. About being a family again. She held out the coffee. I miss you, Colton. The house feels empty without you. The house had 6 people in it for months. You didn't notice me missing then. You know what I mean. Her voice cracked. We screwed up. I know that now. We want to make things right. I didn't take the coffee. You want to fix this? Start by admitting you treated me different. That Vicky's always been the priority. That you spent 19 years making me feel like I was worth less than her. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. That's what I thought. It's not that simple. Yeah, Mom, it is. I stepped back. I gotta get back to work. She stood there for a long moment, then set the coffee on the hood of her car and drove away. I gave it to Garrett on my next break. To anyone reading this who sees themselves in my story, The overlooked kid, the backup plan. You can find the people who actually see you and let go of the ones who never did. It won't be easy. You'll doubt yourself. Wonder if you're being too harsh or expecting too much. Family guilt is a powerful thing, and they'll use it if they can. And honestly, walking away from people who never saw you coming is the most satisfying revenge there is. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.